Right, let's touch on the latest from Israel that's important. And the problem with this always is there's so much. If you join us on Telegram, we have channels there where we're touching on the news. We have a chat group where you guys can just chat about world events. And most importantly, we have a prayer group where we pray for each other and support each other in prayer, because we are commanded to pray for one another. And we see amazing things. We also testify about miraculous things that have happened through that day. So join us on Telegram, because the Israeli news happens by the minute, not even by the hour anymore. God's little clock in the Middle East is spinning so high that it sounds like an aeroplane about to launch off an aircraft carrier. So you have to really sift through to get the big ones that we can discuss on a platform like this that are important. So I've got 4 here from Israel that I want to touch on today. The first is it a ceasefire if the fire doesn't stop? The Biden ceasefire in Lebanon fell apart in literally 4 days. Officially, according to Biden, it's holding. In what seems like a Seinfeld routine, administration officials and their media allies are propping up a dead ceasefire by arguing that you can have a ceasefire even if the fire doesn't cease. There's been a dramatic reduction in the violence. The monitoring mechanism is in full force and working. White House National Security Spokesman John Kirby. Largely speaking, the ceasefire is holding. We've gone from dozens of strikes down to 1 a day, maybe 2 a day. So then how's that a ceasefire? Ceasefire, but they're firing once or twice a day. It's not a ceasefire. We're going to keep trying and see what we can do to get it down to 0. Rather than withdrawing from Israel's borders under the terms of the ceasefire, Hezbollah has violated the ceasefire, has begun moving personnel and rocket launchers south of the Litani River, closer to Israel, as well as smuggling weapons in preparation for a resumption of the fighting. Israel quickly responded by enforcing the terms of the agreement and taking out the terrorist forces. Hezbollah fired mortar rounds into Israel, and Israeli forces struck back as fighting resumed. Within days, the ceasefire wasn't even one in name only, and the Biden administration immediately blamed Israel, saying it's Israel's fault that the ceasefire is not working. Never mind that Hezbollah broke all the rules of the ceasefire and continued firing. Hezbollah's not at fault, Israel's at fault. But then by now, you should know that this is how it works. You can do what you want to Israel. You're covered. You might even get a pension or even a Nobel Peace Award. But Israel must not react, must not defend herself, must not point out the obvious, because then it's her fault. Then the other interesting thing is the Druze. Now in Israel, there's a very small community of Muslim Druze. And those Druze are part of Israel, and Israel protects them. And they're very pro-Israel, the ones in Israel. The rest of the Druze community, the majority, live in Syria and were always proactive for the Assad regime. Israel, in all the skirmishes across the lines, defended the Syrian Druze by keeping Islamic militants from entering there and causing chaos, even though those Druze were not supportive of Israel. Now, in the wake of the fall of the Assad regime, those Druze in those communities have gotten together and they've said, what is our fate, brothers? Syrian Druze now call to be annexed to Israel. A convention of dignitaries from the Druze village of Hadar in the Syrian Golan called to join the Israeli Golan. In the videos, a dignitary who spoke in front of a crowd of dozens says, in the name of all the people of Hadar, if anyone objects, please say, if we have to choose, we will choose the lesser evil, to be annexed to the Israeli Golan. The speaker argued that Israel for them is the lesser evil, warning that the other evil is coming our way, meaning Islamic militias. They would take our wives, our daughters, and our homes. They called on Israel to trust their good intentions despite their former alignment with Assad. So it's very interesting now because they're asking Israel to annex them. It's not Israel expanding her borders. Now, if Israel accepts and annexes them to protect them as part of an expanded Israeli border, the rest of the world is going to say, especially Erdogan, look, this is their true intentions. The Israelis are trying to expand Israel and take more land from the Muslim world. Watch this space. While the Middle East is in meltdown, the world is still obsessed with Israel. An alarming number of states have failed because they don't have what only Israel has, a founding document that holds the state together around shared ideals of freedom and individual rights. It's rare to see anyone recognize that Israel is the only country in the region that has anything close to a founding document that values freedom and individual rights. In fact, it's more likely the opposite. Israel receives more venom from the world than any of its neighbors. You can even see it this week at the United Nations. As my friend Hillel Newer of UN Watch wrote to me in an email, on December 11, the UN General Assembly will hold an emergency special session against Israel. And during December, the UN will hold the second and final votes for many of the 2024 annual anti-Israel resolutions. In 2024, the UNGA is expected to adopt 17 resolutions on Israel and only 6 resolutions on the rest or the entirety of the world, which will include 1 resolution each on North Korea, Iran, Syria, Myanmar, Russia, and the United States. Everything else is a focus completely 100% on Israel. How absolutely crazy is that? It makes you wonder what they're thinking. And I'm going to do a separate video where I address this in more detail to show you the bias of the United Nitwits organization against Israel. Then the hostage deal, supposedly close. I'm more optimistic than before, senior Israeli source tells All Israeli News. Here's why Arab US diplomats are also increasingly optimistic. There appears to be a real and substantive movement towards a deal. Movement accelerated since Trump demanded all hostages be released before he takes office, or there will be hell to pay. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told hostage families this week there are reasons for optimism. Increasingly optimistic himself, Jake Sullivan, the Biden administrator's national security advisor, was just in Israel and the region to press for a deal. Right now, it appears that Hamas is prepared to turn over close to 36 hostages, including women, men over the age of 50, and those with severe medical problems. Another reason hope is rising is that Hamas is now discussing the names of specific Palestinian prisoners they want released from Israeli jails, something that has not happened since November 2023. Again, I'm not a fan of these deals where they release terrorists straight back into the mainstream in exchange for hostages that should have been released without any caveats or discussions or anything, because what happened there was wrong. They should have just released them. But everybody's excited. We'll see what happens with these hostage deals. We pray for the hostage families who've been suffering all this time and the hostages that are still alive. Pray for Israel. Stand with Israel while you can, while we're still here. Shalom.